Hi Ruby, this week you're going to be working on identifying existing articles and studies that will be helpful in terms of writing the introduction section of the manuscript. So if you remember the introduction section of the manuscript, of a manuscript in general, really any paper that you find, it typically starts off justifying the importance of a given topic. So for example, it might talk about the prevalence of the issue, incidence of the issue, maybe the economic toll of whatever that issue is, and then it kind of funnels down. So it talks about the specific issue in whatever specific population you might be looking at. And after justifying the importance of the topic, then it typically talks about the existing research and kind of like what we know. So it might review several studies that have been done that are closely related, and you'll talk about what those findings are from those studies. And then based on what we know and the review of the existing literature, we typically talk about the gap that remains in that scientific field, so the gap in knowledge. And then that introduction typically ends with a section that talks about the purpose of the study. So let's take a look at an example paper that I published with some students last quarter, and we can look at this. So this is the PDF of a paper that I published with a group of Cal Poly students last academic year. This is what our introduction section looked like. So this particular article was looking at different access to care related factors and their association with attempting to quit smoking. So those independent variables included things like having an identified healthcare provider, having a recent checkup, those kinds of things, and we were looking to see if those were associated with whether or not someone tried to quit smoking. So if you look at this article, you'll see that it talks about, kind of starts off talking about how cigarette smoking is the leading cause of preventable death and disease in the U.S., talks about changes in smoking rates over time. It talks about some background information on the fact that people can quit smoking by using evidence-based treatments. It also notes the Healthy People 2030 goal of trying to reduce tobacco use. And it also gives some important background information on the topic, talking about, for example, the Affordable Care Act and all of the things that are now required now that the ACA has been passed and implemented. So after that kind of justification of the importance of the topic and providing that really basic background information to the reader, this paper then goes into the previous research. So it talks about the fact that previous studies have focused specifically on like health insurance and tobacco cessation. And so I talk about what those studies are, talks about essentially what previous studies have done on this topic. And given that these studies exist, we've talked about these studies in this section, we then go into the gap in knowledge. So you can see here it says, whereas previous studies have highlighted ACA-related increased access to care, studies examining the relationship between access to care-related factors on quit behaviors after the ACA are limited, right? So we don't have studies that are looking at this specific research question. And then there's some other issues in terms of the gap in knowledge here as well. And so it kind of justifies the importance of our study. And then in this last section, it finishes off talking about the purpose of this particular study, right? So it says, our primary purpose was to examine the association between having a healthcare provider and time since last routine checkup with attempting to quit smoking in the last 12 months. So this last paragraph clearly states what the purpose of the study is. Now, this week, you're going to be working on an abstraction table. All that is you're setting up an Excel document and you're tracking 10 articles that you are going to find this week that will help you with writing this introduction section. So there's kind of two things that you're going to need to think about in terms of articles that you're going to need to find. You're going to need to find articles that help justify the importance of the topic. So you might want to take a look at some of these articles. These might be of relevance to our specific research question. You want to find articles that talk about maybe the current prevalence of cigarette smoking. So how many people still continue to smoke? What are some maybe health-related issues that smokers encounter from using tobacco? What are evidence-based strategies to help people quit tobacco? Anything that is important in terms of describing the burden of tobacco use. You might want to also introduce smoker protection laws. So like, what are those laws? You might want to define those early on in this as well. And then you'll also need to think about articles that you can include in like the previous studies section. So in terms of previous research, I think some areas to focus on is finding articles that maybe look at smoking bans in the workplace and maybe whether those affect smoking cessation, smoke-free workplaces. You might want to also look, in addition to things like smoke-free workplaces, you might want to look at literature to see if there's existing studies on non-hiring policies for smokers. So some employers have just basically moved to non-hiring policies where they just don't hire smokers. And we want to see maybe are there any studies that look at how that has affected smoking rates. I would definitely start off looking at specifically like smoke-free workplaces. I would look at non-hiring policies and maybe other workplace policies and whether those kinds of things have been shown to be associated with smoking cessation. So the gap in knowledge is that a lot of previous studies have basically just looked at things like smoke-free workplaces, non-hiring policies, but no one has really looked at smoker protection laws. So that's why our study is important. This week, I just want you to focus on finding studies that we can cite and talk about for justifying the importance of the topic and also talking about the previous research that has been done in this area. So I've got some resources for you on Canvas. And if you click on this critiquing a research article, I know that you've gone through research articles at this point quite a bit. You can just kind of read through this and it'll help you kind of identifying the different sections of the article and kind of how to critique a research article, which you probably know how to do at this point, but I've got it there just in case. I've also got some resources on abstraction tables. I want to point out that there's, in these examples, this one is probably has the most relevant components to it. If you preview this, you'll see that you want to have definitely the reference, the purpose of the study, the sample size, and characteristics and what measures they used. You don't need this duration column because it's not always really applicable, but you definitely want to summarize the main findings and then also talk about any strengths and weaknesses of those articles that you find. Remember, you're going to need to find articles that justify the importance of the topic and also articles that you're going to essentially find that are the research that's been done in this particular area. So you need to find at least 10 for this assignment, and again, you're just setting it up in this Excel sheet. You can use a Word doc too. This one's set up in a Word document. You can use an Excel sheet. It doesn't really matter as long as you've got the table set up here. You should be able to actually download this document, this sample lit review table doc, and if you want to just delete the stuff in here and use this as the template, you're welcome to do that as well. So that's the plan for this week. You're just going to be finding articles that will be helpful for writing the introduction. Ruby, keep in mind that you should be spending about 3 hours a week for this class. And so if you're finding that finding those 10 articles and summarizing them is taking way longer than 3 hours this week, please let me know and we can adjust the schedule as needed. Also, we will be meeting on Tuesday, so if you have any questions, we can meet then and talk about any questions you have.